Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about Age of Mythology Retold. Multiplayer, to talk about the multiplayer situation, my perspective on it, the good, the bad, all of that. Now, I do have to say that I appreciate the amount of effort that the developers have clearly put with respect to Age of Mythology Retold. In a lot of ways, this is what Warcraft 3 Reforged should have been, and wasn't. Clearly was not. And why do I say that? Well, it's not a remaster. It's also not a remake. It's in between. And that's what Reforged was trying to be, and, well, also miserably failing in that particular respect. This, however, runs well. It looks good. Like, it runs well. Some of the animation qualities, you know, could leave a lot of can leave something to be desired, but like for the most part, it is a great version of the game, and I genuinely enjoy it more than the original version, except the new voice acting. That's a different discussion, but still, I do enjoy this particular version of the game a great deal. And yeah, I wish there were things like blood and bones, you know, like markers for, you know, dead people and all that kind of stuff. That would have been nice to certainly see. But overall, from my perspective, they've done a great job. But I do see issues with regards to the multiplayer. Don't get me wrong, they have done quite a bit to try and improve the balancing in the multiplayer. So I do think it's better than the original in quite a lot of ways, in quite a very substantial number of ways. And it's always worth keeping in mind that the meta is not established right now, that it's still early days, and maybe we don't necessarily have the player base right now in multiplayer to give us the perspective we need, because it takes a while to play the campaign. I imagine a lot of people are going to try and play the campaign, figure it out. That's going to take time. It took me 40 hours or so to go through the campaigns. Let's say 30, you know, depends on the difficulty you're playing on. But yeah, I imagine like the pool of people that are actually playing multiplayer games at the moment is not, at least consistently, is not necessarily a very, very large one. At least considering how things are standing right now. This particular match, by the way, was an Uranus mirror match. It was one of the longest games I've played the multiplayer so far. And I figure my opponent, what his original plan was, he was trying to gain naval dominance because there is the river cutting through the middle right here, and I wasn't going to let him do that. So I pushed very aggressively, maybe in a way that was very harmful to me, undeniably so, because I did end up getting a lot of my troops killed, but I did ruin his plans, and I did have the initiative. Like, he went to Oceanus. I think he was trying to blockade these fords over here, make me play his game on his terms, you know, build a line of fortifications, and then he would attack me when he was ready. You know, he would have the initiative, he would have the aggression. I wasn't willing to do that. Playing around us, I was able to sneak a sky passage over here and just, yeah, get the palace, town center, all that, you know, just be very aggressive. Even if I would lose over here, it got to the point like he had to spend a significant number of resources to push me out of this. So that ultimately ended up going in my favor and did actually win this game. So here's my perspective on the multiplayer. They have improved the balance by quite a substantial amount compared to where the game was. They removed the worst offenders. The freaking Chinese were not a great DLC. So they have removed that. They've improved the overall balance. That is great. However, there are still a lot of issues, but still early days right now, so we don't know how things are going to shape up. But if I look at the leaderboards, if I look at what people are playing and how they're playing, you look at something like AOM stats GG, right? And you can see there the games, the duration of those games. And what I'm seeing a lot of from the best players in the world right now, from the highest ranked players, what I'm seeing a significant amount of is I'm seeing very short games. And when I say short, I'm seeing a lot of games like 13 minutes, 16 minutes, something along those lines. Many of the games that I do see in multiplayer, like on average, if you're, say, playing 100 games, if someone in, you know, among the top players is playing 100 games or so, maybe 10 of those games would be 20 minutes or longer. Or about 20 minutes. And for the record, a lot of them are roughly 20 freaking minutes. That should give you an idea of how things are. Now, this game right here is 21 minutes. It's going to last 40 minutes in total because I got a lot of back and forth over here. You know, he's starting to spam destroyers, he's getting palaces, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I wasn't necessarily playing in the best possible way. I'm not the best player. But I am seeing that. And on top of that, I'm also seeing a lot of the vast majority of the best players, you know, top 20, top 30, all that, top 100. What they're using is they're using gods like Odin, who is probably the most popular god like of the major gods right now. I'm seeing a lot of people going with Odin, with Poseidon, with Kronos, those kind of things. I am seeing quite a lot of right now in the game. And the reason you're seeing a lot of them and you're seeing them dominate the multiplayer is not necessarily because, you know, Poseidon is the best god overall. He's not necessarily the best god. But the reason you're seeing that is because a lot of the games right now are being dictated by early game aggression. So the gods that are good at that, you look at Odin. I think Odin is the most dominant god by far at the moment in the multiplayer. Hades had his moment. I think Hades is certainly played on a lower level, but on a high level it's things like Poseidon, it's things like Odin, Kronos, Set, those kind of things. Isis, sure, you can talk about Isis. Not seeing a lot of Ra. Seeing a couple of Thor, seeing a couple of Uranus, but yeah, those kind of gods. The ones that focus heavily on aggression, because a lot of the games that are being played right now are being decided in the very early game. So, especially with high mobility units. This is the reason behind Poseidon. With Kronos, it's a bit of a different discussion, but Kronos has the ability of time shifting his buildings, so he gets map control, and also he can spam Prometheans pretty damn quickly, so that is also a pretty substantial benefit. It's like, the person who was rank 1 in ladder for a bit, he is rank 2 at the moment, the last time I looked, and which was just like an hour ago or something, so it can change pretty quickly. But the person who was rank 1, he got to rank 1 by literally playing as Kronos and winning games very quickly by time shifting his temple on top of the enemy gold mine and getting Prometheans as he got to H2. That was the strategy he used to rank 1, and that gives you an idea of where the meta is right now. It's very early game focused. It's very focused on early game aggression, and there's a couple of issues with that. One, I think it leads to less interesting games overall, because like, I'm not saying every game should be a 40-minute slugfest, but I also don't think a game should be decided in 10 freaking minutes, which a lot of games, by the way, are. 10, I would say 16 is probably the average. 16, 15, 16, something like that, along those lines. That probably would be the average on that high level. For lower levels, obviously a bit of a different discussion. This is certainly on a lower level of play. Like, I'm not going to proclaim that I'm a great player. But you're seeing these games and their duration and what people are using. It's all about cavalry, harass, rushing. That is dictating. It's things like Turmas. It's things like Centaurs. It's things like raiding cavalry for the Norse. Those are the things that are winning games at the moment. So beyond the fact that it's less interesting to have that kind of meta, from my perspective in a number of ways, the other problem that this creates is you have a situation in the current meta where a lot of the games that are being played right now are being dictated by who knows which rush build to use. It's not like, oh, okay, my opponent's doing this, so I'm gonna do this. No, you either know beforehand what your opponent's gonna do if they're playing a particular god, and you know how to counter it, or your fly are gonna lose. That is certainly a situation I'm sure a lot of people are encountering. Hell, they're encountering it on a high level of play, not necessarily lower level, but you know, the people that are playing on high rankings, that is what they're doing right now. They're trying to, you know, outdo each other with rush tactics, basically, one way or another, or cheese builds or whatever, right? Or specific unit builds that have a specific advantage, and that's not really great from my point of view. Because one, it's going to turn off a lot of people, because like, let me say this, as someone who's seen this in Warcraft 3, someone who's seen this in StarCraft 2, someone who's even seen this in Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition, though far less so, I gotta say, Pretty much any strategy game has had these kind of moments, but it is always infuriating to lose when you didn't even have the chance to begin with because you didn't know what your opponent was going to build before you started the freaking game. Like the specific build, the specific timings that he was going to use, that kind of stuff, right? That is not a great situation from my personal perspective. So that's one issue with regards to that, and I'm sure that's going to throw people away. The way StarCraft 2 quote-unquote fixed this is they made it so that they gave you more workers, more resources, more possibilities in the early game that you didn't have initially. Like when you compare StarCraft to Wings of Liberty versus, Legacy of the Void, and how many workers you start with, the pacing of the game, how many bases you would use, that kind of stuff, right? It was a completely different game. And I think it was much better off for it by giving you those extra resources from the very beginning, and made for far more interesting games than what we saw in Wings of Liberty, at least from my point of view. Don't get me wrong, I played a lot of Wings of Liberty ladder. Bit rusty right now, focusing on various other games, but that was a good change from my perspective. Maybe not to everyone's taste. I understand that, it was a bit jarring, actually more than a bit jarring when I figured that was the new meta. But I think overall that was better for the game. Unless balance was broken, infestors, swarm hosts, all that kind of stuff, right? Balance just being completely broken. And by the way, it's still not perfect. And that's an easier task to balance that game than balancing things in a game like Age of Mythology Retold. But I don't think they're doing themselves any favor. Because this is the problem, really, with this. The bigger problem, I would dare say. Beyond, limitations, screwing players over if they don't know exactly the build, all that, and how to counter it. And, having a god like Odin who gets HP regeneration for those, things like Great Hole units. Yeah, that can be a bit of an issue, suffice to say. And also extra favor, and extra food generation, and having safer food generation as well, because of the hunt situation that you literally want to use on your initial, on your initial animals over there, because it is extremely powerful. Because hunting animals generates food faster than farming or berries, or even herdables. Though herdables are pretty competitive as well. So just got to keep those aspects in mind, the kind of issues that do exist with regards to that. But it just means that a lot of the major gods and minor gods end up not feeling that great. And also pushes people to, go for certain units all the time. Like if you're playing Atlanteans, you almost always want to get Turma one way or another. If you're playing Egyptians, you want to get Chariot Archers. If you're playing Norse, you want to get raiding cavalry, all that. And a lot of units do end up feeling redundant, regardless of how good or bad they are. It's like they don't have the mobility, they don't excel at aggression, they don't excel at map control, and that is a bit of a problem. I feel Age of Empires 2, for all its issues, did handle that better because, defenses were very strong, and you didn't have, the god of powers, which could, win an individual battle, especially some of the higher tier ones, granting you that significant power boost. But, the way things are right now in Age of Mythology, you end up with a lot of gods, units, upgrades, you name it, that just end up falling behind compared to others. Because ultimately, if you're looking to, say play Atlanteans, you're going to want the Terma. You're going to want Prometheans most likely, unless you're playing Gaia, of course. If you're playing Norse, it's Daddy Odin is supreme and no one else compares to him. That's statistically a fact at the moment. Compare the win rates people are seeing. Even people that are doing well with Thor, they don't have necessarily the win rates that people that are doing well with Odin have. And there's a lot more people playing Odin than there's people playing Thor. So I think that is something that the developers should concern themselves with. How do you make a god, a major god like Freyr? It's he's supposed to have these offensive benefits, and it's he's not great at the defense. He's actually just not great in general. Or how do you make a god that might be better in, like, say, a longer game focused on booming? How do you give them that capability? One of the problems is that, you know, if you don't have map control, you don't have hunts, you don't have gold mines, yeah, you probably won't run out of wood, and obviously you can always switch to farms, but it is obviously an issue that you're going to deal with. That's the reason early game aggression is so significant. What would be a solution? I don't think there's any easy one, but I also say, like, maybe there's way too limited resources on a lot of maps in a lot of ways. Like, that's one of the reasons. Maybe defenses are too weak to deal with, like, you know, the situation. Like, building walls, like, for instance. Like, don't get me wrong, I wasn't necessarily fond of the wall building meta in Age of Empires 2, but having a situation where building walls, in a lot of cases, right? You still want to build walls in certain situations, certain key locations, to be certain. You want to build defenses, undeniably so, but, you know, if your opponent has map control and you don't, you know, that can be a bit of an issue, or even an even bigger issue. So those are the kind of things to concern yourself with when you're looking at Age of Mythology. So if the developers don't want the situation to be the game meta to just basically be dominated by whichever god or gods are best in that, you know, time frame of 10 minutes, or which god is great if they rush to tier 2 as quickly as possible, as opposed to, you know, waiting there, getting more villagers, getting more resources, they do need to change some things. Maybe resource spread, maybe the amount of villagers that you start with, maybe the amount of resources you're starting with, maybe the map design, and of course the balance of various gods. Those would be some of the things I would hope that the developers are looking at. And we'll see what they decide to do with a major patch, you know. But I'm going to say it outright, the solution isn't, and I'll be very clear. While we can talk about, like, which gods need buffs and nerf, like, the solution is not going to be, oh, we'll nerf Odin's gathering capability or favor capability or something like that, right? That's not going to be a solution. That's a band-aid. The inherent problem is the game very much rewards you for having a lot of map control, regardless of how you gain it and with whom you gain it. It's just that some are better than others, and if you nerf one and buff another, then you'll just replace one god with another. That's the problem over here. By the way, this game dragged on, and it's like I literally needed to get to Titan level in order to make this to get a win over here, because, like, yeah, my opponent certainly built a lot over here, and I wasn't sure, like, how much he could afford, because he was constantly throwing out stuff against me, right? It did seem like at this point he was kind of running out of stuff, but it's like, yeah. I just decided, you know, I'm gonna get the Titan, I'm gonna end the game over here, and it's like, that was GG, pretty much. I did hurt his economy quite a bit. Like, yeah, this was actually a lot of fun as a game. Like, it may not have been the most professional game, but, like, it had a bunch of back and forth, and maybe that is the point. There's a significant lack of, like, genuine, like, back and forth, and, you know, say what you will about StarCraft and Warcraft 3. Like, yes, there are backs and forth, but I'm also seeing a lot of games where it's just like one curb stomp or another. Hell, I've played my fair share of those games one way or another. It's like, you and people just, like, realizing either very quickly that they're not going to be able to keep up with their opponent and quitting, or they try to and they inevitably fail, and you're just spending 10 minutes over there just obliterating their base or getting your base obliterated, you know, against an opponent that pretty much has won the game 10 minutes ago, something along those lines. Those are the kind of factors, like, you know, the recovery, if you will. Again, it shouldn't be just the case. It's like, oh, if I know my timings perfectly for H2 and H3, for Thermos, for Cavalry, for all that, if I know exactly when to get specific units or specific upgrades, I'll flat out win the match. And yet, that is the feeling I'm getting right now in the game, and I can't necessarily say that I like it. Well, that's pretty much all I had to say on the subject. Costin signing out, and I'll just leave the rest of the match over here so I can enjoy my Titan curb stomping my opponent.
Topos. Yuji. Topos. Yuji. Correct. Topos.